pixel art. It's going to be very basic. Hello. Welcome to COMP253. That's Assets for Game Developers in the Fall 2018 semester at Centennial. And we're week 5, part 1 of our broadcast, and we're talking about Intro to Pixel Art. This is very challenging because some people, what they find is they think pixel art is easy, actually, but there's a lot of art to doing this. In fact, it's one of the most difficult things to do, I would say, at least for me, because it's trying to use your imagination to add in details by just using pixels. And we'll talk about what all this is. I'm just going to maximize this so we talk about it a little bit. I'm not sure what you're going to see when I record. So if you're seeing these two screens as opposed to just one, then I do apologize. All right, so there's a book. It's called Pixel Art for Game Developers that I'm going to be using. Actually, you know what? Let me slip out of here again, and I'll go back to this view. It's pretty big, so you can see it. So Pixel Art for Game Developers is the book that I use for this part of the course. And what I want to talk about is a few things. What is pixel art? Why pixel art, which is kind of a couple chapters from his book. And the last part is Intro to Pixel Art, which gives us the kind of a start on what we want to do. So, hey, what is pixel art? Well, you know what? 3D graphics, it's not pixel art. So some people say, well, you know, maybe it's 3D graphics. That's not pixel art. And you know what? Vector art, like this, is not pixel art either. So this isn't pixel art. And here's some more vector graphics. Sometimes you see this and they're like, hey, this is pixel art. It's wrong. It's not pixel art. This is not pixel art. This is vector art. Okay, interesting. Here's some more vector art. So interesting stuff. It looks like someone's drawn this by hand. So this is not a rendered image or a picture. It looks like some kind of vector drawings. And the way we do vector drawings is we actually use a program like Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever to keep things very, very simple. The good thing about vector art is it actually changes size nicely, so it can expand to fit larger screens. Web application developers and web artists use a lot of vector art because it's more scalable, all right? So that's one thing that they use it for, but that's not pixel art. Here's something. Here's a hand-drawn art scanned into things. So let's say, for example, you did our little poses that we did today and you scanned it in, or you took a picture of it, and you have something called a bitmap. A bitmap is a series of pixels that is just data that is in a 2D plane, all right? So it looks like there's some kind of image here, but this is not pixel art. This is scanned art that's, you know, put into a bitmap format. And here you can see the bitmaps have been reduced, but they're not being reduced properly, so it looks pixelated. Again, not pixel art. This is just pixelated, you know, bitmap, okay? It's interesting the way he broke this down in the book, too. Again, not pixel art. You can do this with your Sketchbook Pro. You can take an object. You can make a little funny character. This is all hand-drawn. You can see that you've got areas here that have been sketched by hand to make this turtle. Maybe you've got a little bit of what looks like airbrushing techniques and stuff to create this art. But this, my friends, even though it's simpler, is not pixel art, okay? So what is pixel art? It's an image where each pixel is visible on the screen, and it's been placed intentionally. It's not random, okay? It's not because you've scaled down an image from like really, really big to really small, and it's been pixelated. No, that's not what we're talking about here. So this would be something that we would consider pixel art, right here, this image here. So I'm going to bring this in a little bit so you can see this. You can see that you've got each of the pixels in the picture made like this on purpose, right, to create an effect. Notice here that we've got more darker pixels here to create the illusion of a shadow, and there's some lighter pixels up here to create the illusion of light, right? So this, my friends, is an example of pixel art. Any comments or questions? What do you think, Philip? This one here. Kind of very simple pixel art. Right, you can see the pixels in the picture too. If I can zoom in here, you can see it's not pixelated necessarily by accident. It's been made like this because this is the effect that the artist wanted. Okay. I don't know if I like this part in here. Some people like that kind of thing. I don't mind the background. The background looks pretty good. And the key, how it's kind of, if you notice, it's kind of glowy. Looks like the key is glowing. How did they accomplish this? Lighter pixels around this one, right? So some dark pixels to denote the key, some yellow areas, and then some glow that happens around the shape of the key, right? So again, it's illusionary. The idea that these trees or bushes or shrubs, this is a tree here, and you've got some areas that look like they're lighter green areas, lighter green pixels, and darker green areas to produce that shadow effect. That's kind of what pixel art tries to do. Okay, so it's a unique style. It's a very retro looking style. A lot of people love pixel art when they look at this kind of stuff. It's especially popular in games nowadays. And it's something that it is good for you guys to know when it comes to creating games. So why is it important? Because you know what? A lot of gamers love it. A lot of gamers. There's been quite a few. It's made a surge of pixel art kind of games over the last, I would say, 10 years. There's been lots and lots of them, especially from the 90s on. I would say there's been tons and tons of pixel type games. And they're still very popular today, even though 3D games and first-person perspective games, shooters, and all that kind of stuff are really, really popular and more realistic looking. There's also there's a market, if you will, for people who are interested in these kind of games. So a different kind of aesthetic altogether. So here's some games mentioned in the book that are popular: Chasm, Super Brothers, Super Dwarf Madness, Super Crate Box, Tiny Barbarian, and a bunch of other ones. How do they look? So here's an example of Chasm, right? So I'm going to bring this closer so you can see this. So this, again, is something that happens with pixel art where you have, you can create something called a tile map, right, with a bunch of graphics that you can repeat and use over and over again. But you can see that here we have some areas where the main character is inside of a platformer kind of game, where this would be the top of the platformer. Here's the character. You've got some kind of items or objects that he has to avoid. Like, for example, these arrows or spikes that look down here inside this pit, right? And so you can create backgrounds with pixel art as well as characters, light areas and dark areas to give the impression of depth. But really, it's all 2D pixels, right? Any comments about this one? It's not bad, right, in terms of the way it looks. Huh? Pretty good. Philip's not completely happy, but here's another one. So this is like kind of a top-down game. It reminds me a lot of some of those older games, like games like Golden Axe and other games like that, where it's kind of a top-down game. You've got some very basic UI. So you can see that the lines are very, very, the borders of the lines are very small. But take a look at some of the duplications happening here for the bricks. Like, this could also be used in almost like I said, a tile map where some of the tiles, I'm just going to get in here a little bit closer. Some of the tiles have been reused. Can you see some of the tiles that repeat? Take a look over here. Take a look over here and over here. So very similar between this one and this one, right? These ones here, the fire almost looks the same. This one, not so much. It looks like it's been scaled a little bit, but very similar. And same thing with these bricks that have been, there's some kind of repetition between some parts of the brick. But the idea is that you have a light source that's kind of in the game. And where would the light areas of the game be in this map? Can you see it? Where would the lights be? Well, it looks like the lights are pointing to the left. So you have some corner of the screen where you have an imaginary light, which is lighting this part of the bricks, and the other part of the bricks are dark. So it gives the illusion of depth, right, where there is none. There are two levels of light, but this is definitely one of them where you see that there's pointing down this way. There's also some ambient light because you see some shadows up here too. So it's almost like it's another light that's from outside that creates this area that's lighter over here, and there's a darker shadow area right there. Yeah, it's interesting. Here's that light here, which kind of shows you what it looks like to have this light that creates lighting around these objects as well. And this is interesting too because you have lights from the outside that create shadows this way and lights on the inside that create shadow on the inside. It's almost like you have two levels of lights, right? When you say two levels of light, it's almost like if you can imagine lighter areas and darker areas, where is that light coming from? So in here, right, inside this middle area here, right, you can see that there's light that you can see on the front face of the characters here and here, right? At the same time, though, you see where the shadows are. So the light is coming from this direction, the bottom, right? Because we can see the person, right? And there's lights that's lighting up the stone in the front. At the same time, you have some interesting light effects where the stone is coming down this way, right? So light's coming down that way. So some people don't like this style because it's like, it's confusing, right? It's like, where's the light coming from? It gives you this idea, this sense of depth when there isn't any. This is almost like 2.5D in some ways, where you're looking at, it's not quite orthographic. It's not quite 3D. It's something in between, right? And this is all, of course, done with pixel art. So every pixel has been deliberately put in this place to make it look, to give this look and feel. Okay. So some tools. So things not to use: don't use Photoshop, Krita, Inkscape, Illustrator, or GIMP. Typically, people don't use those things for pixel art at all. They're specialized programs that are just for pixel art. The first bit, I would say Graphic Scale, Piskel, Pixie, Pixel Art, and Make Pixel Art. All those first part up to where it says ProMotion. So up to here, it's all these first parts. They're all free and they're all online. You can try now. So please take a look at the tools that you've got here, because you're going to use one of those tools, whichever one you like, to create your experience for today. A couple of the bottom ones, ProMotion and Asprite or Asprite, are more professional level programs, and they're also very expensive. Some of them, well, compared to what you have to do, more expensive. ProMotion is probably the most popular tool. It does have a free version. You can actually try this out for free, but the real tool is real crazy, right? It's, I think it's $150 or more. Yeah, the full version is pretty good, and as Asprite is pretty good too. So these two tools are more paid for tools, but the ones from Make Pixel Art up to Graphic Scale are all free tools that you can download. Some of them are cross-platform, or you can use online. Graphic Scale only works on Windows, doesn't work on a Mac, right? But for the most part, these are some of them. There's many other ones. This is just a small selection of programs that are out there that allow you to work on pixel and do pixel art. So how does this look? So let's take a look at one of them. If I want to see Piskel app, this is one of the most popular ones that are out there. I'm going to go to a browser, and let's take and see what that looks like. So it looks like this, right? And if I sign in, let's see if it remembers who I am. Maybe it won't. Here I am. Okay, that's me. And if I create a sprite, you can do this really simply. You can see that you have a preview of what it looks like over on the right, right? And then you have a sprite that you're going to create. There's lots of control here that we're going to go into. If you click on this little toolbar, you can resize the image. So right now it's 32 by 32. You can change the size. I can save the image. I can also export the image to different programs, right? I can import images in here. Again, I can actually turn on the grid size, like if I can make it bigger or smaller, which is really important. Different kind of colors that I can specify. And I can even go into tile mode, which we're going to get into at some later point. All right, so that's one. There's also layers. You can add as many layers here as you want. We've been working with layers all semester. It doesn't matter which program you're using, whether it's Photoshop or Illustrator or even Sketchbook Pro, as an example. You can definitely use layers. There's transformations where you can do flipping and rotating and all kinds of other stuff that's available here for you. And on the left, you have basic tool sets that allows you to do things like basic drawing. You can draw bigger images with small pixel sets or larger clumps of pixels. But at the end of the day, what you want to try and do is draw your sprite. So again, if I take some, I'm just right here with black color, and if I start drawing, you can see that as I drag my pen, I can get to drawing some kind of pixel art I'll get a preview that looks like here and a closer preview of the areas that I want to over here. I can add more frames because I can use this tool for animation, which we're going to get into, pixel-based animation. Again, if I just drew this image and if I click this transform, I can flip it from one side to the other, right? Which is really interesting to do. I can add layers. I can rotate this image around, all right? And again, this is all something that's web-based and online. Frame rate, this is FPS. Frame rate is useful when I want to try and do animations. I don't have really animations to do. What other things can I do? Well, you notice that there's a little keypad shortcuts that you can learn for this tool, which are quite easy to do, right? So you can kind of remember that if I want to bring the pen tool up, or if I want to do a vertical mirror pen tool, which is actually one of the most really cool things to do. So let's just make a new pixel. So I'm just going to refresh the screen, reload it. And if I press this, which is my vertical pose pen, notice it gives you some other options. It says Control allows me to use horizontal axis, and Shift use horizontal and vertical. So you can actually do both. So if I click this, now I have some kind of thing on both sides where I can create very similar, again, shapes by using this kind of thing, right? Where I can create the shapes that I want, right, for my object, whatever they're going to be like. Okay, and you can see that sometimes proportional editing like this is really cool because you can create your objects the way we want. Okay, so that's kind of an idea of how to do it. You can see again your preview of what this looks like here, right? Of what the actual image is going to look like. Again, this image is 32 by 32, and if I wanted to scale it differently, I could. So this is definitely one program you could use that's free. I can add more frames. The more frames I add allow me to create things like animations and those kinds of things. But I recommend when we go through this exercise today that we use layers. Layers. So make a layer for different parts of the body. Make a layer for the head. Make a layer for for the torso. Make a layer for the arm. Right? Copy it. Put it on the other side. Flip it. Right? And so you can have proportional kind of looking thing that you want to do. Comments or questions around this, the tools. Why this and why not use something like Photoshop? Photoshop is too fat, and it won't actually allow you to do this very easily. You have to zoom in very, very closely. You have to create an area that's 32 by 32. Could you do it with Photoshop? Absolutely. Could you do it with Illustrator? Maybe not as well. I don't think Illustrator is the right tool at all. There's other tools out there, even GIMP. You can do it. Should you do it, though? I don't know. I think these are better tools. They're made for this kind of work. I think there's some, a good way to start off with some of this stuff. And as long as you use standard, basic principles, especially when you create images of yourself, which is going to be one of your assignments from today. I'm going to give you the assignment later on, right? Again, I'll probably make it worth like 10% or 15% of your final grade, make your pixel art happen. And we're going to use all the things we've talked about already, things like proportions. Think about the way you look. Now, how do I make it look like it's more pixel art as opposed to realistic art? What we've been doing so far with our pose practice is all realistic looking figures. That may not be the case here with pixel art. It may look totally different, more exaggerated, more cartoony looking, if you will. But it's got a whole life and a look of its own. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So these are the tools you can use, and there's many others like them. You choose the tool for yourself. It doesn't matter which tool you use. For me, as long as you can produce the stuff that I'm asking you to do. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about lines. So one of the things we want to try and do when we do pixel art is consistent step patterns, right? So if you notice here, you have some blocks that are thicker and some blocks that are, sorry, I'm just going to go over here and look at this. You got some blocks that are like, let's say you got 2 pixels, and then you got like 4 pixels, 4 pixels, 2 pixels. No good. Doesn't look right. Unless, again, it's something that you want to do with an effect. This being, if you're carrying this on. So typically, we don't want to do this. Typically, we want to have some kind of diagonal line with a pattern, right? Sometimes, as an example, like it says, avoid using inconsistent step patterns because it looks wacky, right? And it kind of makes your art look weird, right? Consistent step patterns will look a little bit better. Now notice this is more of a diagonal. This is a much sharper line, like right on the 45. This is a different angle that you want to try and do. Sometimes you have no choice but to do this. This can help you out too, where you have kind of 4 pixels, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, 2 pixels, and it keeps repeating over and over again to kind of give a different sharpness to the line. Okay, so alternate step length is okay, but inconsistent steps like this, no good, typically. How about curve lines? Curve lines are quite difficult to do properly, especially if you do them by hand, right? Where you have this idea here, where you have kind of an area here that's very inconsistent, right? And this little point, this little lone pixel, they say always avoid the lone pixel. Don't leave a lone pixel out like this. It looks kind of weird, right? Whereas this is kind of the same shape. It's kind of curved. It's not exactly a circle, but there's no inconsistent lone pixel just like sticking out like this. You don't want to avoid that kind of thing as much as possible. Just basic things. Avoid the lone pixel. I like that. Curved lines are difficult. Again, you can see that there is a pattern here that doesn't look as curved, like it looks more straight. And then you have this area here that is, it breaks it off, where this one here, you see that there's a consistent pattern from here to here, and then it slowly curves on the other side. So you can see that this pattern is okay, right? But this one, where you kind of come down like this doesn't look like a curve. And also, what they also tell you to do is watch out for those circle tools. Sometimes the circle tools give you some weird, wacky stuff too, especially in those drawing programs like Photoshop. Because what Photoshop tries to do is it puts the circle in a series of pixels, right? Where it kind of tries to break the pixel off. Depending on how big you make the circle, if you make it a certain radius, right? It's wacky. Because if you make the circle something like an even amount of radius, like 32 and then 32 this way, maybe it's okay. But what if it's like 33? That kind of produces a center pixel. That might be better in some cases and worse, right? So 32 on one side, 32 on the other side, and then a pixel in the middle, right? Which creates a wacky situation sometimes. So beware of the circle tools. Sometimes circle tools can lead you astray as well. Line width. A lot of times we don't want to do this. We want to do this. We want to do a single line a lot of times than compared to a double line. Notice that this is, it can produce, when you hear you have a consistent step pattern, but when you do this, it can look a little jagged and rough, right? A lot of times what we want to use is anti-aliasing, which we'll be talking about right here. So here's an example of a skull. One skull on the left, no anti-aliasing. One skull on the right, you've got some anti-aliasing. So what is anti-aliasing? Anyone know? Go ahead. Tell me what you think it is.
It's just like a smoothing of the lines.
Smoothing. Okay, so provides a smoothing, but what it does is actually include noise. That's what it does. So here on the left, there's no noise. It's exactly black and white pixels. No noise really here. Here, though, you have extra noise, and it's almost like there is the black color and the red color has been averaged, right, to create a middle color in the middle somewhere. And that may not exactly be the middle. It could be more towards the red or more towards the black, right? But there's like two colors that have been mixed in here. So around, I'm just going to kind of zoom in here so we can talk about it a little bit.
It's a problem with the film tool and like the one selection tool when you like have
anti-aliasing, right?
Selected, and then you select an area where you're actually not selecting the entire area.
And then what happens is you have extra pixels. You have extra pixels that have been anti-aliased, you know, from a tool, from some kind of smoothing effect. Yeah. And then you have like these different colors, and almost like you have these speckles of different colors. Sometimes you get like really weird, wacky colors too, like nothing to do with red and black. You might have a yellow in there or a white or something else like that because of the anti-aliasing trying to do. Your computer program is trying to figure it out, right? So here's an example of anti-aliasing. You've got a white background and you've got this black border, and then in here you've got a gray, right? Because it's taking the white color and the black color and trying to figure out something in between to create a smoothing effect. The more smoothing you do, the more aliasing you get, anti-aliasing. And it can make your diagram very pixelated looking. Not pixel art, pixelated. It makes it look like blurred, right? Blurry and ugly, yeah. So you got to watch this. This isn't a bad level of anti-aliasing, but on the outside, there's a problem. See, look at the outside, exactly what you're going to say. The outside, you see this part here? I don't know. You know, I'm not sure if I would use this type of smoothing on the outside. But the inside is not bad. It gives it more of a realistic kind of a depth to it, if you will, or some kind of more roundedness. It looks more of a smoother looking skull. There's some more work that they could have done over here, especially with shadows and stuff, to add more depth to look to the skull. But at the end of the day, be aware of anti-aliasing, especially if it's a tool that does it for you. Be careful, because sometimes automatic tools mess you up. Okay. So just techniques. Because all we're doing at the end is putting pixels together, right? We're just painting pixels, one pixel at a time, until you get an effect, right? One of the things that I want to tell you about before we move on is pixel art takes a whole lot of time to do right. Pile of time. Like, you can spend a lot of time. You can use some fill tools to help you out, right, at the end of the day. But if you really want a really solid looking effect, it's like, I'll tell you right now, I do layers and layers and layers, where I can try it out and then I'm like, ooh, that didn't look good. Let's put it back. The whole layer effect. Don't try and do it all in one layer. I'm telling you, it's a mistake. Use multiple layers, right? Because then you can remove them, put them back, adjust them, remove them, put them back, take a look at it, and then until you get the effect that you want. Again, it's an iterative process where you kind of build. It's almost like baking a cake. You keep on building layers and layers and layers until you have the right look. And sometimes you can remove layers or erase stuff or whatever, and it's not going to affect the bones of the drawing. The bones of the drawing should be there. Now, everyone does it differently. This is how I do it. I use it by building up layers when I do my pixel art, okay? And it takes a long time for me, like a hell of a long time, because I'm a perfectionist. I want to make sure the shadows are right. I look at the picture. I draw the lines in one of my pictures. I actually draw the lines of light and say, okay, this is where the light's going to come in. So I'm going to have shadows over here. I actually draw it by hand, non-pixel art. Draw it by hand. And then on top of that, I layer the pixel art on top of it, and I have a diagram. I have a reference image a lot of times is what I want to do, which is what I want you to do for your face. All right, so again, pixel art, anti-aliasing. Okay, let's move on. So now we want to try and do this. This is kind of the exercise that I want you to do today, okay? I'm not looking for this level of fidelity, all right, today. I don't want this. I want this. I want you to draw a very simple character. Now, if you've done it before, it's going to be easy for you. But for other people, I want you to start off with basics. I'm going to assume you don't know anything. And you're going to also learn the tool this way, the pixel art tool, all right? Whatever pixel art tool you choose to use, all right? So I want you to follow. I'm going to stop recording, right? Because what I want you to do is I want you to follow the shapes. So I want you to start off with a circle tool. This is a very fast way of doing it, right? And I want you to adjust as necessary. So what this means is start off with a circle, but then what I want you to do is create the shape of a face. Remember the skull we drew earlier, where you have a rounded part on the top and a more angular part on the bottom? Think about that when you draw the jaw. So this is where the jaw of the character, the bottom part of the character is going to be, right? And then you want to draw this line. Usually what you can do is you can draw a reference line and another layer, right? So draw your reference lines, your grids, and all that stuff on other layer where you can take it away and put it back, right? It's a helpful reference tool, right? So here we have this other layer, and I draw a reference, and then I'm going to put the eyes, notice, without a face, somewhere in the middle of your exact middle of your head, okay? Because remember, the eyes are going to be placed somewhere in the middle of your head all the time, and the ears are right next to the eyes. All right, and if you notice, if you were to rotate things, the eyes would be up here, and you can see that when the eyes go down here, everything else follows. The nose would be down here. You can do this. The eye position changes what the character is looking at from down below or up above, and you can use this a lot, this idea, when it comes to animation. We're going to get into animation, right? So if I look down, you can see that the whole head, I'm going to see more of the top of his head. And if I look up, I'm going to see more of the bottom of his chin, like here. I can see here where he would have his neck on the left-hand side. Okay? All right, so the bottom of the nose is the next part we're going to draw, and then the mouth right underneath the nose. And then finally the eyebrows. Okay, so I want you to go through this drawing. I'm showing you what it's going to look like. I'm just going to fast forward here. So then you draw the torso. After you draw the torso, I want you to start drawing the leg. You're going to have a leg like this. I recommend putting it in another layer, like we've talked about, and then flipping it around. So you're going to do one of those. You're going to flip it around from this side to this side, and then adjust. So you make some adjustments to, make it more realistic. For example, inside here, there's been some adjustments made into the for the leg to make sure that the leg connects properly, right? Then you're going to go into the arms. You're going to start off with an arm over here. You're going to add this arm over here, and then you're going to, flip it and use the arm on the other side. Here's something you also could do if you really want to. There's nothing wrong when you create this character to use a mirror, right? A lot of times people use mirrors to do characters like this because the other side of the body is done automatically at the same time. However, I want you to notice there's going to be some weird, messed up areas, and you got to turn the mirror off sometimes, especially when it comes to the mouth. That might mess you up. The nose, and anything in the middle of the body, you're going to have some artifacts. So you have to know when to turn the mirror off. But for things like the arms, like that might be just a fast way of doing it. You mirror, and then all of a sudden, on both sides, the arms come out. But again, focus on one side of the body first before you do the other one. Another really good thing, we've been focusing on poses this whole semester so far. Think about this. Think about, creating your pose for your character on another layer. And then on the top layer, the one that's going to go on the bottom, use your pose as a guide. Still do the shoulders just like we normally would. Maybe it's going to be more exaggerated. Like here, notice that this character's head is much bigger than normal, right? Our head isn't not normally that big, but we're making a character for a video game. So we're exaggerating things. And his body shape is very quite square, right? As opposed to triangular, right? Or a different shape where you have almost like a diamond shape, more of a diamond shape here than triangles, right? But what I really want to get you to is the point where you start like this, and then the final thing that I want to get you to for his head is this. Okay, so that's the most detail that I want for his head. So you start off like this, you add a little bit of hair on the inside, and then you start adding some hair detail on the outside on both sides. You clean up the inside of the hair altogether until you have something that looks like this, okay? So this is the exercise that I want you to do. You're going to hand this in for participation for today. Remember we did the pose and we did the building last week, and this is going to be your participation for the pixel art, right? And this is going to help you with what you're going to be doing for yourself when you take a look at your own picture. And how do I convert my picture, an actual picture of me, into something that looks like pixel art, right? Again, think about light and dark areas, okay? Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at a person's face. So I'm going to use some reference images before I do this. I'm going to kind of kill this PowerPoint for now. And let's start off with a new sprite. Okay, so here's our new sprite. My background, is this checkerboard, which is totally fine. But sorry?
Sorry, what's the pixel size you want?
Oh, the whole, you mean the...
Because it depends, you change the style.
Like how small the pixels are, how many pixels?
Like you want 32 by 32, 60 by 60.
You know what? Make it so like it's like, I would say 32 by 64, right? 32 by 64. I think it's a pretty good size, right? 32 by 64 is a pretty good ratio because the character is longer than he is wider in this particular case, so it might be a good size for your character. Fill the whole thing, 32 by 64, right? So let's take a look at a real image. If I was going to do a real image of a person, so if I said, let's take a look at a famous face. Let's take a look at Angelina Jolie. I wanted to see her face for a second, right? And she's going to be pretty big. So here's a person's face. Maybe this is how she was before. She's more like this now. But you can see that we've got a person's face, right? And we have a shape that we want to do. Notice how her jaw is quite strong, and her lips are quite big, right? In this particular case, that's why I wanted to use her, because she's got some exaggerations in her face, right? You've got kind of a curve to her eyebrow, and if I was going to do her eyes, again, I could see just parts of her eyes that I would do. You've got some area of her nose here, but her nose isn't that big, and then lots and lots of hair on the other side. So if you were going to do this pixel art, how would you start it? What would you do? Well, a very thin layer to describe the outside of her face. That's what I would do with pixel art, right? And then what I would do is, again, I would just create borders around everything first. It's going to look pixelated on purpose, right? And this is without any kind of shadows or anything else like that. So when you do your own picture, this is what I want you to do. Imagine if it's your own picture, I want you to just surround your face, get a good picture where you're head on, you're dead on looking at the camera. You can make it so that your picture is looking to the side, but I think it'll be more challenging for you than if you made the picture look dead on. So if you want to, you can take a picture of yourself against a blank white wall, or some kind of like a projector screen is another good place to take your picture. Get a buddy of yours or a friend of yours or a family member to take a picture of yourself against a white background like this, right? That you're looking dead on in the picture, right? Straight on in the picture for your assignment, right? And then start the best you can. Start putting together your image, right? By just adding pixels around the border, you know, just slowly trying to draw out the border of the shape. So if I was going to do, you know, this, the other thing is, for reference images, you want to save them, right? Like here, I mean, I'm using something on Google. I may not want to do it this way when I'm using something from Google. Remember that I also have the ability to import. So if I go back to Piskel, right? It says that I'm allowed to export images as a spreadsheet. I can also import an existing image or an animated GIF, right? So which ones can I do? I can browse local saves. I can browse images, which are PNG, JPEG, BMP, or GIF images. And I can also browse backups of previous sessions. So let's save the Angelina Jolie face. So I'm going to kind of get here, and I do apologize for people watching this. I'm not choosing any face for a particular reason. So I'm going to say save the image as. And we'll put it in the same place in our assets. We'll just call her Angelina. Right, she's a JPEG image. And that's 480 by 360, so it's quite large, right? I'm not going to do anything to reduce it right now. I just want to see what Piskel is going to do if I do this. So I'm going to go over to Browse Images. And no, this is the wrong one. I want to go into our folder and grab her face and then open it up. And it says, okay, import as a single image, resize to 259 by 194, right? Import as a spreadsheet. I don't want to do this part. I want to do this. I can also make it smaller than this, but for now, let's start off with a big image like 259 by 194. Import. And it says this will replace your current animation. No problem. All right, so there's Angelina's face. I've already got an advantage here because I've got quite a lot of pixels. My problem is that I've got too many pixels. Should I start like this? Think about this. If I was to do Angelina's face, do I need you to do this level of detail, by the way? Hell no. I want you to make your pixel art something like, at the maximum, 128 by 128. Maximum. 128 pixels wide by 128 pixels tall. Because if it's any bigger than that, it won't reduce properly and it won't look right. So what could I do differently here if I wanted to bring her face in? So she's already pixelated. The program's already helped me. She's pixelated, but she's not what I want. Well, I have multiple layers. Remember, I went to there. So one thing I could do is I could just keep the image the way it is and bring it in. I don't recommend this because of how big the image is. I want to reduce it even further. So one thing that I like to do before I bring it into a program like this is even reduce it further with another program. So if I bring it in, if I go take Angelina's face and I pull it into something like Fireworks or Photoshop or whatever, right? So let's just open it up. And here she is, right? And she's already pretty small, which is good, right? She's already pixelated. But what I want to do is I want to make it even smaller. So notice that I'm at 259 by 194, and I want to do proportionally smaller picture. How about these black bars? There's a lot of extra information here that I don't need. So first, what I like to do is crop the image. So I'm going to take this image here and crop it as much as I can. So I'm just going to use my crop tool. You can find the crop tool, by the way. This is not a great picture because I'm missing part of her hair, right? And the top of her head. I don't have that. So that's kind of something that I'm missing. And do I really care about her neck? Maybe, you know, so that's okay. But for this, I probably want to crop the image first. So now I got another image, which is, you know, something like exactly actually 156 by 194. So I want to cut that probably in half, right? Or at least because I want to bring the image that's 194 to something like 128, okay? So what can I do to do that, right? Well, one of the things that most modern programs do is they can do proportional image editing. Notice if I press the shift key here in Fireworks, what it'll allow me to do is bring it down so that it is the maximum of 128 by 128. So my height has to be 128. That's the biggest part. So it's going to go down to about right here. And that's proportional now. So it's 128 by 103. Now that's the biggest that I want you to make your image. Where you really want to go is something like 64, you know, a 32 by 64. So let's even go further down than this and let's see what happens. Okay, so this is 128. And if I take it a step further down, so this is like what we're doing today. So I'm going to do like something like 64 pixels way down here. It's going to be lots of pixelation. The height is 80. So I'm going to go right down to 64. Let's see how that looks. You can see I'm just dragging it down. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to go to Modify Canvas. I'm going to trim my canvas. Right, here it is, and save the image. I don't care about the original right now. We're just playing. And I'm going to bring her image in. So I'm just going to kind of do a new sprite here. Right? So I don't care about the other ones. Let's kill these ones. This one. And this one. These are all the things we played with today. And even this one. And I want to bring her image in. So I want to bring in, oops. I want to import an image that's JPEG. I want to browse her picture again and open it up. And it says, look, import as single image 52 by 64. Good. It also says smooth resize. I don't care about that. I don't mind rough. And it says, okay, and do it. Now we're a little bit better. Take a look at that now. Okay. This is not the layer that I'm going to draw on, though. Okay. I'm not going to draw on this layer. I'm going to draw on the layer underneath it, right? Or above it somewhere. So I'm going to add another layer. And you can see that as soon as I add a layer, I'm on layer 2. Here's layer 1. Layer 2 kind of, or layer 1 starts to become, faded out, zoomed out. And I can start using some border colors with a small pixel size to kind of define her face. Now, luckily, her face is somewhat proportional. But let's see if I turn on, kind of mirror, what happens. So if I start drawing from the middle of her face, you can see that our face mirror is off a little bit, right? See how she's off on the left? How that doesn't work, right? So a couple things I could do. I could shift the image to the left a little bit in my application. I could do that. I could also transform the image, right? It's not what I wanted to do. Undo. I could also transform the image by moving it around, by copy and pasting, right? But in this case, what I may want to decide to do is not to put in the mirror because it's not exactly in the middle of her face, right? Her face would have to shift to the left about, I would say, a couple of pixels for it to be in the middle, right? So, I mean, again, depending on how you make your face, this is your way of taking images too, right? You can get that her face done as proportionally as possible. The other thing to do is literally just zoom in. Okay, so again, I want to zoom in. If you press down on your middle mouse wheel, you can move the image around, right? Until you start getting into this area that's anti-aliased here, right? So I want to start adding again a border that's on the top. Let's just do that. I meant to take off that. Let's just take off the symmetry here for a second. I don't want symmetry. And I just want to create that border on the right side first, where again, I want to kind of think about the steps that I'm going to use where I do that, the rounded shape. I'm thinking about going down like this, right? And I'm just starting to draw pixels. And I can always, if I don't like something, I can always undo them. Control Z for undo, right? I could also follow the exact place, the exact position of these things. So I can kind of do, let's undo those. So only in the dark area. So basically in this pixel right here. So this is the pixel that I want to follow for the dark areas as I map out the shape of her face, right? So then I'm going to kind of go down here. Will it look the same as her original picture? No, right? Because what's going to happen is that her face is going to look like a pixel drawing eventually, right? That's the idea. Oops. So undo that part. So we're just going to go straight down in this case. If I want to get rid of this pixel, I can right click, right? So again, I want to go straight down to capture the kind of shape of her face. And then we can go in and fix it up and adjust later as we want, right? Again, you may disagree with this, but this is kind of like a reference image that I'm using to get this kind of the shape of her face. You can see that this part is kind of where the ear would be, right? If I really want to put that in, or I can go straight down, and I can keep drawing her face slowly, slowly until I have the shape that I want. But the idea here is that I want to start primarily from the top of her head. It's just easier to draw, and especially when it comes to drawing, I want to go zoom in as much as I can with this canvas, the size that I'm doing right here. So again, I'm kind of just following her shape of her head. And then from there, I want to follow some kind of pattern where I'm going to get the same shape for her head as much as possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you're going to get a difference between one side and the other, and that's okay, right? I mean, you're going to have to kind of go in there and see what it's going to look like. Take a look on the left. You can see that it's kind of, proportional. I've also got a bit of her ear in this picture where I'm kind of getting her ear here. Okay, we're going to fix this up later on because we may decide that we don't want to have her, she's not exactly the same from one side and the other. I'm just going to drag here, and then I can go through here and clean some of these areas up where there's too many pixels. Typically what I do is I like to delete and make it as lean as I can in these areas because it provides maybe too many pixels for what I want, right? Like this. Right, so I kind of do one of these areas here. And then until I have the shape that I want for her basic face, basic shape. You can see here that I've got that. And I've got layer 1. Now it says layer opacity, right? I can change the layer opacity between 1 and 0. Opacity means how much I can see of it, right? And if I want to, I can also delete this layer later on. If I want to, I can delete the layer, right? No problem, which is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to capture her skin tone necessarily, though, right? So now the next part is I want to capture her eyes. You can see that her eyes are going to probably be this particular shape, right? Where she has these, kind of eyes that look like this. All right, so there's her eyes. And then her nose, areas that are kind of darker in her nose. And you can see again that her eyes are slightly different on one side than the other, right? So again, I've got this area here that brings me her eye, right? And again, you can embellish. You can make it look like whatever you want at the end, whether it's one side or the other. Right, and again, I'll probably do the same thing, following the same pattern. If I was going to start down here. So just outlining the face that I'm getting. So this is her face. And I'm doing everything with black because I want to be consistent in my color palette for now, right? But we're going to get it so that her mouth and the shape that we're looking for is fairly consistent as we wrap, her lips and everything inside of this, pattern until we get to see something. If we don't like something, we can always get rid of it, right? Say maybe more like this. And sometimes what I like to do is go in there and clean it up again. So if I added too many pixels, or I didn't make it wide enough, or I don't like the look of it, or whatever, I can just go in there and just clean it up until it's right. It still doesn't look right to me. Her lips, I need a center line, so I'll kind of do one of these. And that looks like her mouth is open now, but I can kind of take away these ones. I'm just right clicking to do that, by the way, until I have something like this. So something very basic, right? So for her mouth to look kind of like this, right? We also want to get the idea of where her nose is. A lot of times I like to use the side of her nose. So I kind of draw a line right at the side of her nose like this. And then you want to get the outline of her nose. So maybe something that looks like this. So you don't want to make it so that she looks like a pig nose, right? That would be bad. But something that kind of gives the idea of what her look is like. Sometimes also you can get this idea of what her eyes look like from far away. Get an idea of what her eyes look like from far away. And we're using just a reference image for how this looks. Okay, what do you think so far? All right. Again, if I zoom in and if I want to see her reference image, I can see that her eyes are kind of this green color in here. I can do the same thing by changing colors. I'm not ready for colors yet. I want to just do shapes. Shapes are the first layer for me, right? And again, if I was going to zoom in and zoom down, again, I'm just trying to draw her neck. So it's just a straight line all the way down and a straight line all the way down. Clean those dots up. And, you know, again, we may have to clean up the neck a little better, but there we got some part of her look, right? And we've got our first layer. Again, what I want to do here is when I do her hair, I want to be as just to create an outline. We may go back and kind of take away details here. But what I want to do is like literally just get an outline of what she looks like. Maybe add another outline there to get kind of that look and feel. And we don't have the complete picture of what her hair looks like, but basically her hair is going to flow down this way and flow down this way. And you can see that slowly we've got an outline of what Angelina Jolie looks like. Okay, so this is what she really looks like over here, right? This is kind of a preview of her image on the. It's kind of hard to see over here, but you can see now that she's kind of get this pixelized look. Other things that I could add in, if I want to add cheekbone definition, I could add some cheekbone definition here and some cheekbone definition here, which to kind of give her that look that she's, you know, more of a you know, kind of this look. And we haven't anti-aliased anything yet. But the next step would be for me to be starting to fill things in. I don't know, Philip, what would you do next? Would you fill in another layer? Would you copy it? What would you do if I was going to do this layer next? Again, we very little detail right now. Like we're just talking about lines. Like for me, I like filling first. I like doing a basic fill. So I would probably do a fill here. Now, choosing the color is kind of important. So what I like to do is sample from the original color. And I think this color is too bright. This is where the light is, but maybe this color here for her skin, something like this tone in here is probably right. So I want to kind of get that tone. So here's the tone that I got. So this is the tone for her skin. And if I go back to that layer, and if I choose that pixel that I want to put in there, oops, that's not what I wanted. Let's go back. I'm still eyedropping. So uncheck that eyedropper and go back to that other layer. And with the eyedropper tool, this is the color that I want. If it's too bright, I can always bring it down. But what I want to do here is just click this, which kind of gives us the look and feel for her face. So there's her face. Same thing with the neck. I want to kind of put that in there. And I've got these areas here that are different colors. So I want to kind of do a pixel of, you know, kind of some kind of thing that's in here for what her lips are going to look like, right? So again, I can go and do a color picker. I want to go back to layer 1. I want to kind of grab some, you know, kind of images for her lips on the bottom. Now her lips are separated. The bottom and the top are slightly different, and I'll do that. So I'll kind of go back to this, go back to layer 2, and click in here. And what I want to do here is I want to kind of put her layer in there and then go back to the color picker because I like to try and pick as many colors as I can. That makes sense. Kind of pick this other darker color up here for her lips, this other color, and go back to layer 2. And then that's the color that I want there. I'm just testing it. If it doesn't look right, I can always change the color later, but that's kind of the color that I want to do right now, right? And for her eyes, I can pick whatever color I want. I don't need to fill that necessarily, but I definitely want to choose her color palette that's right. So I want to kind of choose, it looks like she's got these green eyes. It's hard to see, but I can always just try and pick a random pixel from there. Looks like this color here. I'm not really happy with this color, so I want to bring it down into the green spectrum, which I can by just pulling this down and recoloring it, right? So getting a green color. If I want a lighter color, I can, choose more of a green color to exaggerate more, like one of those, right? Again, this is up to me. This is the art part that I want to do. And I want to kind of go back to her image, right? So I'm going to go back to this and go back to my layer and then start there's only 2 pixels here, so I want to put those pixels in right now just to give her some wacky look. That's pretty wacky looking, right? And there's no anti-aliasing at this point, none. I've got this brown color out here that I'm going to use for her hair, right? And I'm going to basically connect everything else. Now, I got to be really careful. When you do fill, sometimes this area here and this area here becomes black. So I might as well fill this area here and this area here with black already, right? So I want to go back to my fill tool, my paint bucket. I want to go back to this color, and I want to hit black, this black color right here. And then once I've got the black color, I want to kind of fill this area and this area with black because that's the area that's going to be what she's going to look like right now. You can see her preview as it's layering down, how it looks like, right? It's not looking that badly. She kind of looks like herself, but this is a caricature of what Angelina looks like, right? It's not exactly what she looks like. Just trying to capture some essence of her face, right? And then what I want to do is I want to get the color of her hair. Now, this is a multi-layer process. You can actually create regions of her hair to give it more interest, right? So I could go in here to this tool and then kind of slice up her hair so that maybe some parts of her hair looks darker or lighter, right? Maybe give her a bit of an ear there. And we can actually delete some of these. I can also do the color chooser here and give her a bit of her ear there or undo those changes for now. I can also do the color picker. Once I've got the color, I can go in there and just, I can just go back and, kind of take those areas away to see what she's going to look like. This is a good preview of what she's going to look like now, right? All right, and let's just go back to finish this off where I want to grab these areas here. This color here is what I want to make her hair look like. So again, I'm going to use the color tool, color picker, grab over here. That's that color. I'm going to go back to this, go back to layer 1. And then what I want to do is I want to take that paint bucket tool and start painting areas of her hair until she has a look of what she looks like. And then I can add more layers on top of that. We've kind of run out of time, but this is my Angelina Jolie. What do you think? Right? I can also hide her layer. Her original layer was this one. I can get rid of it. So now this is what she looks like. Right? So this is my first layer of Angelina Jolie. Right? Okay, so not so bad. This is what I want you to do for your image. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to do this right. Okay? Because we're going to add some other techniques next week about how to add shadows and those kind of things. So what I want to look at is your preliminary image of what your pixel art image for yourself is going to look like next week. I want you to show it to me. All right. So please be prepared to do that. We do this really quickly. There's definitely some things we can do to add and make this even better. But this is a good start. This is probably more than where you want to go in the beginning. Again, if you think about it, we haven't even touched anti-aliasing or any of that stuff, that kind of stuff at all. You can make this, there's a lot of tools here. This is an online tool, but there's definitely tools here that you can use, right? That you can, like where it says here this is the dithering tool where I can use this to undo. where I can use this to lighten. So I can kind of say, well, I want to lighten this. I can lighten it more or less, right? So let's undo that change. And again, the great thing is I can choose the strength of how I'm doing it, right? Depending on the the options on the tool. Now then, this is a very simple tool, right? So I can, drag this area here, undo, and maybe what I want to do is change the size of my, pixels to do some of that lightening, right? To create the effects that I want, especially things like, under the eyes, like in the eyes here, where I want to lighten these layers, right, in the eyes to create that lit or that lighter effect. So you can see the sclare of her eyes more, as opposed to what it looked like before. And we're going to talk more and more about that, how to make different parts of her face. Like, for example, the top of her lip here, I want to definitely lighten it, not maybe that light, but maybe just by clicking it a couple of times, you can decide that you want a lighter layer in there, and I can go right in there and lighten these areas, and especially the top of her lip, so I can get some of that, because that's where the light's gonna hit her first, the top of her lip, right? And so she's got this, these areas that are lighter or darker, depending on what she's doing. So I can continue to work here until I, create, the lines that I want in her face by literally simply left-clicking on the area that I want lighter or darker. And we'll talk about that next week. But you can see that slowly, Angelina is going to come along. Okay, so that's it for this week. I'm going to put up your assignment for next week. Please look for that on eCentennial, right? Again, all it's going to be is it's going to be probably worth 10 or 15% of your final grade. It's going to say, hey, make a pixel art version of myself. How am I going to look like? Some people also have added teeth, which can look really weird, right? So imagine if you did teeth and you want to do pixelized teeth. Now this image here is pretty big, right? It's again, it's it's 32, or sorry, I made it 64 by 64 if I'm not wrong, right? So it's pretty big, 64 by 64. We're going to try and make this better and better. Actually, this particular case is 52 by 64. You can see that, 52 by 64, right? And it's a kind of a zoomed in image of her face, right? But the great thing is that we can animate Angelina by making her look to the right or left by moving her eyes, right? One of the things to do here is you can experiment with this. If I add a new frame, right, here's my frame. You can see now that what I want to do is I can go and duplicate the frame from one frame to the other, right? And I can delete this frame. And what I can do is I can actually move her eyes so that she looks to the right or the left by going from one frame to the other. We can have X number of frames of animation. We're going to get into that next week. We're going to focus more about that for sure. And we're going to get to that as we go. Any questions around the stuff that we have to do for next week? I know some people sometimes are, let's just get rid of this. Some people are a little bit afraid to do their own face because they don't know if it's going to be as good as what they see in their picture. Remember that it's pixel art, so it can never be quite as good as your picture, and you don't want it to be, right? It's going to be something where you want your pixel art to kind of have an idea of what you really look like, right? So kind of, by adding different kinds of color shading, that didn't look so good. And you can always undo. That's a great thing about these programs. You can undo that kind of stuff until you get to the right level of shading. It's shift. Yeah, there we go. All right, that's it for me for today, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Be sure to upload your exercise. I'm going to make another discussion board for your pixel drawing. That's the last exercise that I wanted you to do of that man. I want you to try that out for today. That's your practice. And then next week, you're going to hand in a picture of you. Okay? Or I'm going to see what you're looking like by next week. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.